Let's look at Alexandria real estate equities. First off, read this disclaimer carefully. Then do your good deed of today by liking and subscribing. Yes, this is their website. Alexandria has achieved the three outputs that define a great company: superior results, distinctive impact, and lasting endurance. Here's their website. Basic, looks a bit old, but yeah. I have put this stock in a theme I called Specialized Real Estate Investment Trusts. They are in the offices and laboratories business, basically at the 52-week lows and 33% away from the highs. So here is the chart. We see that there's been a very, very, very substantial pullback. We also see something that is not a double bottom, but it's a bit of a bottoming-ish behavior. There is precedence here of bulls going in here, and they went in here, and of course back in this cluster. So it's a viable zone here for the bulls. So technically you have support, and you also most likely have fundamental reasons why this price range is interesting. Looking at the dailies, the bulls are not doing anything promising yet. Okay. So let's look at RSI and the PPOs. RSI really low on the weeklies. PPOs as well. This is a very interesting level. At the daily data points, we see something relatively similar-ish, but not as clean as on the weeklies, but we are really low. Generally speaking, this isn't like a safe place to go short Alexandria. As such, it could be a better place to consider long trades. Or basically trade ideas where you benefit from the security going up. Oversold. Definitively very oversold. You also have, horizontal support. Technicals here, let me give them a 6. I think this is relatively interesting, but it's not super clean from like a bullish perspective, but it's definitively way more bullish than bearish. And next we go to seasonality. Looking here to the left, you do see that there usually is some strength into 8th of June, pullback, and then some flattish behavior. The table view shows us that June, it's a bit of a messy month, but recently, going back here to 2012, it's more bullish than bearish, but July, July is the #1 month here for Alexandria. So if you are a bear and you're considering shorting a stock, this is not necessarily a very interesting stock to short, because when you have like the #1 month on the horizon, that increases the risk, if you are a bear, that bulls will really start to move into the stock in June. So you're simply not going to get that good short. As far as shorting Alexandria, September is way better. So to consider their shorts later into August definitively makes sense. But to now, even though we are still in May so far, this has been the worst May ever, which from a more contrarian perspective is bullish. Then you have June. So I think that seasonally speaking, I think I will give the bulls. I think I give them a 6. This is rather interesting, but there's a bit of a risk that some of the weakness of May might continue a bit into June, but definitively not that far into the future, we get the type of seasonality that is just terrifying for a bear. You just do not want to be short a stock when like the #1 bullish month is approaching. So yeah, seasonality 6, it looks pretty interesting and corroborates what we saw on the technicals. Okay, let's do it like this. Here we have price book. This is one of the lowest price books we have had, which means that there's definitively value. Price to sales, the same thing, really, really, really low. Price earnings also really low. Yield very high. There is, of course, the inverse relationship between yield and the price of the security. Here are the analyst forecasts, pretty darn bullish. Let's go here to the overview. Here you can see the yield, 4.33%. So when it comes to the fundamentals here, I think I will give, I will give a 9 here on the fundamentals. So that's the top score. So this is a very undervalued stock. Looking at comparing it against itself, which is the most important thing. We have never seen this low valuation. The yield is good. So if you are into fundamentals, this is a really good stock to consider. Here we are looking at relative performance, comparing Alexandria statistically against the S&P 500 long term, 55% correlation, 81% with REIT, the global real estate ETF, 81% as well with the US focused real estate ETF. Dailies, minus 16% with S&P 500 all of a sudden, 64% with REIT, and 79% with IIR. So what happens with IIR is going to have the biggest effect on Alexandria. We are at support on this one. Seasonality, strength into 8th of June, some weakness, then strength. The table view, June, more bullish than bearish. July, really bullish, which also is, of course, good for Alexandria. Let's compare them against each other, like that, and like that, and like that, and like that. And we start here with the weeklies. Looking at the RSI, we have seen some pretty substantial underperformance from Alexandria. We usually see some rebound after this kind of underperformance. We are just really low, but still the bulls haven't shown strength. So just because we are low doesn't mean that's necessarily bullish, but it means that if you are a bear, you do not want to have like a general method where you short things that are at like really low levels. That's not a good idea. Dailies, similar thing. We are really low many times in the history of these two pairs. Well, this pair, it's one pair, of course. We have seen that this level usually leads to Alexandria beginning to outperform the real estate ETF for a period. Looking at seasonality, not good for Alexandria, weakness into 20th of July. The table view, June, a bit messy recently, can be bullish, can be bearish. July is definitively the number one, well, one of the number one, well, the second best month for Alexandria in this pair. So it makes more sense to be exposed to the ARE stock than the IIR ETF. So given that, I do think I will give the bulls, I give them a decent 5 here on relative performance. We end up with 6.5 in favor of the bulls here. We are definitively oversold. We do have horizontal support. And there's multiple corroborating factors for this bullish thesis. So yeah, this is pretty darn interesting. And also the yield is good as well. But whenever you have like a trade ID, whether it's bullish or bearish, you always, of course, want to have a stop, because if you get stopped out, then you can have an even better entry opportunity in the future. So let's say that Alexandria now is rather undervalued, but let's say that it becomes extremely undervalued in the future, and you get stopped out now, then you have an even better opportunity further down the line. So yeah, it's important to just have a higher frequency of attempts, because the more attempts you have for any kind of thesis, then the higher the odds that you will be able to participate in a very nice move. But if you sort of go all in on a few trades, then the odds are simply just against you. Okay, let's look at these securities in the Boost watch list. So these are securities for which there are leveraged ETFs that we can trade. Let's look at the WIX. The WIX is picking up. I talked a bit bullishly about WIX recently, and there is something happening here. That's interesting. Pick up in the WIX. So even though there's been some moves in the markets, let's look at the SPY. So the SPY is going up, right? Well, people are buying insurance, so there's a bit of a divergence here between those two, and so yes, there is actually some kind of concern here in the market. Let's look at some sectors. Now let's look at the biotechs XBI. Yeah, let's look at the dailies. Yeah, it's a bit noisy. SMH. So this is the semiconductor ETF, huge bullish move. This is of course due to AI. Which means that there is a very high demand for processing units, CPUs, especially GPUs. Having said that, that doesn't mean though that all of the bullish moves will happen for those who are publicly traded, because there's been talks now about Microsoft. They want to sort of build their own processors for AI, which of course could be bearish for those who currently sell processors to Microsoft. But yeah, this is a very big move. Let's look at looking at RSI and PPO. We are not at extreme overbought yet, but this is risky. So I'm not saying go ahead and short it right now, but definitely consider. Looking at the dailies here, though, this is rather tempting as a short. It really is overbought. Seasonality, it doesn't fully corroborate the short yet here to the left. We usually see around early June. That is when the shorts get into action. The table view, June can be very bearish, but also can be rather bullish. And July has recently been pretty bullish, though. So seasonality here is a bit messy. We don't get the fundamentals here, though, unfortunately. But yeah, semiconductors, they seem a very big move. So it's important to be aware that, GPT and AI, it's been in the news for quite some time, and there isn't at all like a perfect match between GPT going viral and this stock, this ETF moving. So that's the messy thing about the market, is that it's not like you can trade the news. So yeah. So basically, Alexandria, very interesting from a bullish perspective. VIX also could be quite an interesting bullish candidate. In terms of going bearish, I do think that some of the semiconductor stocks, especially Nvidia, definitively look very shortable. There's been a short squeeze though in Nvidia, so if you are going short it, definitively have a stop in place, because there are many people now who look at Nvidia and are like, I want to short it. That's why you had the short squeeze, because there simply were a lot of bears who had too wide of a stop and don't have wide stops. That's not a good idea. Much better to have a tighter stop and then, of course, get thrown out of the position and then wait for another attempt. The type of bears that get into those short squeeze that we saw in Nvidia, they are those who have some pain point that is simply too far out, and then of course the pain point is triggered and the massive sell is pushed into the market, and that is when you can get a self-reinforcing short squeeze. But yeah, long term, I am definitively bullish on semiconductors. However, the big question is, okay, how much of the bullish news around AI is not currently priced in? That's the thing. Is the move we saw basically a short squeeze? Meaning that the market actually do think that many of these semiconductor stocks are overvalued. That is why they were short, but they were short in an amateurish way, so you got a short squeeze. But that is very different though from having a very big bullish move, which is that which reflects that the market actually thinks these stocks are underpriced. Very, very different indeed. So, yeah, whatever you do, of course, you do want to have an entry signal and a stop loss, and go to diamondarm.com for more intel.